This is Jocko podcast number 410 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
Vice Admiral David F. Emerson was born in September of 1926. He enlisted in the Navy in 1944, where he served in the Pacific Theater. Then after the war, in 1946, he was appointed as a midshipman at the U.S. Naval Academy. Graduated in 1950 and became a naval aviator. He once again went to war, this time as a pilot in the Korean conflict. And after the Korean War, stayed in the Navy, kept flying, went into combat a third time during the Vietnam War. So that's 3 wars. During his career, he was awarded the Navy Distinguished Service Medal, 2 Legions of Merit with the Combat Distinguishing Device, Meritorious Service Medal, and the Combat Action Ribbon. In between wars, he held a bunch of different jobs in the Navy's commanding officer. Educated along the way, awarded a Master of Arts in Government, and graduated from the Naval War College. Had a wife and 3 daughters. I did some research about this guy. Couldn't find a ton. I wanted to find out what he did as an enlisted guy in World War II, find out what his job was. Couldn't find it. But I did find, and this is what got me on the trail of him, I had read a document a long time ago from a lecture that he gave in 1963 about the principles of war. And he gave it at the Naval War College to the Command and Staff Department. And the notes of this lecture, I think back in the day when they'd give a lecture, they would have the notes and like it was part of their plan to publish them. Mm. Maybe it's like, you know how you can, some podcasts, they have, you can order the notes or you can pay for the notes or something like that. Mm-hmm. I think that they used to kind of do that with lectures. So I got the notes, they're out there from this lecture. And I think it's a good examination, of course, not only of the principles of war, but the principles of life and the principles of human nature. So let's check out this right here. The Principles of War, a lecture delivered at the Naval War College to the Command and Staff Department on October 1st, 1963 by Lieutenant Commander David F. Emerson, U.S. Navy. He starts off, my subject this morning is the principles of war, and I'd like to begin by categorizing war as a science and as an art. Let us define science as a body of systemized knowledge and art as skill in the application of knowledge to the accomplishment of a concrete purpose. And he goes on to say, however, I should caution you that any systemized body of knowledge of war must progress some way before it can be characterized as a science. So he's saying, look, they're calling it a science. It's not a science. Mm. He's like, it's got to get a long way before they can really call it a science. Mm. Indeed, it has been said that the science of war is so obscure and imperfect that its sole foundations and support are prejudice confirmed by ignorance. I thought that was a great way of explaining the science of war. Mm-hmm. It's like your own personal prejudice about what you think, confirmed by your own ignorance. Like that's a great way to describe what the science of war is. You know, when I pick up a document to read, you know, I'm kind of looking for something that draws me in. You know what I mean? Something that says, oh, this person has a thought, a way of thinking that I'm interested in. I just don't want to hear somebody spiel a bunch of facts. I got to hear some angle. Yeah. So when I read that, and you know, a lot of times if I can't find something in 2 pages, bro, we're not getting through it. It's getting deleted from the scenario. Yeah. So he has this prejudice confirmed by ignorance. So he goes on to talk about how do you acquire this knowledge? You can do it through the study of history, or you can do it through case studies. And he says about studying history, in studying history, we have to be careful of a few things. Obviously, we must be sure that the facts we study are correct, and this is not always so easy. Second, we must be wary of the prejudice of writers. No man ever made himself look bad in his memoirs, for instance. Third, we must be careful in passing judgment. It's one thing to study a battle or campaign in the quiet of the War College, free from pressures. Withal, at least most of the facts of the situation in our possession. And it's quite another thing to make a decision in combat. So this is another thing I said, oh, this guy's got some This guy's got some deeper understanding. Because he's like, look, dude, you can sit there in war college and say that was a bad decision. You weren't in the field getting your ass shot up. You're sitting in an air-conditioned office space, flipping through your textbook. Come on.
With a lunch break.
With a lunch break. And he actually has in parentheses, particularly the pressure of time. He says free from pressure, and it says particularly the pressure of time. So, like, what's the biggest pressure? Time.
Yeah.
What's the number one thing that I think about in the leadership loop that I wrote about in Leadership Strategy and Tactics field manual? Number one thing? Time. The number one I'm thinking about. It's the first thing I think about.
Yeah.
And then he says, finally, we should all remember that any man in a position to become a great failure has gotten to that position only through many successes. Good point. I had a buddy of mine. He was a basketball player, and he lost the state championship. He had the free throw. Like he had whatever, a 1-on-1 free throw. Yeah. And they were down by 1. And he was about to just win this game, and he missed it.
Damn.
And it was his senior year. And so they didn't win the state championship. And I kind of said, dude, did you how bad did that crush you? And he goes, well, I scored a lot of points. Yeah. He basically is saying what this guy's saying. Like, hey, man, I was in that position for a reason. Yeah. So I get it. Fast forward a little bit, and you can find this thing online. You can just look up for the PDF or something you can find if you want to read the whole thing. I'm not reading the whole thing.
Wait, so what's the message there behind it?
The message there is like, oh, you look at this person that made a bad decision. You got to remember that they made a bunch of good decisions to get to a point where they made one bad decision. Right. Right?
And so, it mattered, you mean, kind of a thing?
Well, it's just saying like the guy's 99-1. Right? Some combat leader, they made good decisions 99 times in a row. Yeah. As a second lieutenant, as a first lieutenant, as a captain, going up to major, lieutenant colonel, colonel. Yeah. Now he's a general. He's made a bunch of, he's made some small, but to make a great, massive mistake, you had to get in that position. And it took a lot of good decisions to get there. So you can't just throw a guy out because he made a bad call.
Yeah. So it's almost like the opposite of that is like, hey, if you make a mistake, if it ends up being a big one, you can't be in a position to make any kind of big mistake if you haven't achieved that position.
You've made a bunch of good and look, can we find people that are just idiots? Of course. Generally speaking, if a guy's in a senior leadership position, especially like World War II. World War II, they fired generals. Like if they fired colonels, like, oh, you're not doing a good job, they just fire them. Yeah. They don't do that anymore. It's hard to get fired in the military now. They take care of you. They don't take care of the troops. They take care of the freaking guy that should be getting fired. So, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Now, down to the principles of war. First of all, what are principles? In the natural sciences, a principle is a statement of cause and effect or of the relationship between cause and effect and is true under all conditions. A principle of war, on the other hand, is something different. It is an abstract noun or phrase which epitomizes an idea. So there's a big difference between a principle of science and a principle of war. Principles of war epitomize ideas but do not give precise statements of cause and effect. Second, they are catchwords. Here we have to watch ourselves because the human tendency to use catchwords or rules may lull us away from thinking. That's some good advice we're getting right there, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, here's the rule. Follow the rule. And that's your rote move, is just to do what the rule says. Maybe you need to question that. Need to teach my wife. My wife's a habitual rule follower. I mean, if there's a sign on a beach or something that says don't go past this mark or what, just random. There's no one on the beach. It's a sign from 1972. There's footprints everywhere. She's like, we can't go past her. I'm like, what are you talking about? So it says we can't go past. What are you talking about? There's people over there, by the way. There's other people that we just watch them walk by. So she's a habitual rule follower.
Why is that?
I don't know. Some people have a more rebellious streak. I'm on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I'm not quite. Some people that just do stuff just because it's against the rules.
Yeah.
I'm not there. I'm not, because that can get ignorant.
Right.
But my wife's a habitual rule follower. I gotta pressure her.
Right.
You know when a light turns yellow?
Yeah.
Like when you're driving?
Yeah.
Right? Punch it. You know what I mean? Like that's
Sure.
it says accelerate.
Yeah.
No, my wife is like, yellow light means all stop.
What about like unwritten rules like here? And I'm asking for a reason, but let's say there's a right turn traffic time, right? And there's a right turn coming up maybe half a mile. The lane for the right turn is backed up. Is she falling in right in the back of the line, or everyone's
going right to the front? Yeah, kicking on my blinker with aggression.
Yeah, and then be like, whatever, handle that,
Now listen, there's a move where that's like, you're not just breaking the rules, but now you're like being an asshole, right? There's a thing that you can do driving, where that's probably not the best example.
Well, the reason I asked for that example is because you're absolutely right about that. If you're just an asshole, you're like, who cares about, like, the road is here for me and you guys are just in my way. That's an asshole approach to driving.
Hold on. Yep. Yes. Let me say this. Sometimes the reason there's a long line is because people don't know that there's two lanes open, or they're causing problems.
Right.
This is where I drive every day or something like this, like going on the 5 North from SeaWorld Drive.
Sure.
That's a situation, bro.
Yes.
It's a situation.
I know exactly.
And I go to the right lane of the light, and then when that light turns green, I punch it and I get over to the left so I can make the left onto the 5 North. This is a guarantee. Yeah. People just don't know that. So the left going back, it's backed up past the 2 lights prior.
Yeah. That's
people just don't know.
Yeah.
And by the way, to get on the highway is 2 lanes. There's 2 lanes to get on the highway.
Yeah.
And they're not filled up.
Yeah.
Because people don't know.
Yeah, because it just
so that's a rule break. Yeah, but my wife is like, no.
Wait, but is that really breaking the rules?
No,
it's not, right?
And I kind of broke her on that one. Like she's all about it now. She's she's getting.
Yeah, you're just in the know. Because a big part of driving, even lines in general, like standing in line when you're standing there, a lot of that is just, hey, I'm just following the crowd. A lot of it.
Yes.
But unless you're like how you are in the know. If you're in the know, like, no, there's another, like at the airport, whatever, that's another one where it's like, bro, there's another line right there. So 3 people in there. Yep. Meanwhile, you're standing here with 50, kind of a thing. That's different.
That's different. I won't flagrantly cut in the line with someone. If there's like one line at the cash register and that's it, I'm not going to cut mine. But if the line goes around the corner and then it splits into 2 lines and like people aren't seeing that, I might go up there and be like, oh, there's 2 lines, and I'll get in one of them. And we're going to make some stuff happen.
Okay, so this is why I asked, because I'm wondering about your wife now. What level is she at? Because I think there's some function to all of this. But so what level is she at? Okay, so here's the example real quick. So I'm going to the pumpkin patch with my kids. So if anyone
knows, this recent?
Yep. Not last night, night before. So if anyone knows about this part and is part of this, I'm sorry. But this is the way it's going down. Yeah. It's not the first time. It's a system. Okay. I'm not an aggressive driver and I'm not an asshole driver at all. At all. I'm, in fact, the opposite. But at this particular time, I know, because we go to this pumpkin patch more or less every year. They have a cool tour. It's fun for the kids, whatever. So we're going there, and this turn off the 52, maybe the 67, I think, maybe, turn off to where the pumpkin patch is during this time, because it's at night, like late, early evening traffic time. And this right turn is like backed up to like on the freeway backed up, like backed up. So it's either you suck it up, jump in line, but it's the kind where the right turn lane is the one that's backed up. There's only one lane, straight up. So you got to go in line. Otherwise, if you skip it, even if you miss the back of the line and you kind of drive past it, you missed it because there's a whole line there. So you either got to cut in front of somebody or miss the turn, right? So and I know this from years of going there. And I know it's backed up. So I make the conscious decision to be like, hey, we don't want to drive in this lane, in the traffic line. I'm just going to go right up to the front and just handle the repercussions at that time.
Okay, so we can edit this out of the podcast, because if my wife hears you saying that right there, you're going to have issues.
She's not going to like me anymore.
No.
Well, okay, so that's why I'm asking, like, okay, what if, because look,
if there was 2 lanes, which is entirely possible that it's actually a 2-lane exit.
Right.
But people know they're supposed to get off, and so they're half a mile prior, they're just in the right lane.
Right. That's different.
Yeah. I'm down with that. Cutting in, like what you're talking about, really, I'm not super down with that.
Right. So this is why I asked, because I'm not down for that pretty much ever. Like, I'm like, hey, man, just follow rules like everybody else. That's why this whole system works, because we all follow rules or whatever. But every once in a while, can any exception be made? That's a question that I'm
Apparently
asking.
around pumpkin time for the Charles crew. Hey, you know what, overseas, in America when there's like you're going from 2 lanes into 1 lane?
Yeah,
people
the
alternate,
merge.
just automatic alternate in America. In other countries, they just honk and cut.
Yeah.
They just honk and cut. Like, they're not letting you in. You got to be willing to sacrifice your bumper and your fender.
Yeah. Yeah, other country driving the flow of driving is different.
Yeah.
It's different. Bro, we used to go to TJ all the time, Tijuana, and bro, sometimes there's like no lines.
No, they don't care
and bro, they're just flying through. I'm like, bro, and the taxi driver, he's just calm. He's just rolling right through freaking traffic, cutting through this car, that car. Yeah, it's different. That's what I'm saying, though. That kind of backs up what I'm saying, where it's like, hey, this is a system. The less people follow rules, the more jammed up the whole system gets. So that system running smoothly kind of depends on everyone following these rules, even if they're kind of unwritten. And we allow for some fudge factor. Like a guy missed, let's say I honestly missed, like the first time I encountered that line, I missed it on accident. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm waving to the guy. The guy's waving. Who cares?
My wife wouldn't be mad at you for the rest of your life if you did that.
Yeah, that's what I did the first time.
Flagrantly just cut people?
Because I know that's a system, so I kind of pre-plan for it. I'm going to act cool. I'm going to be like, hey, sorry, whatever, and just deal with the fallout, which is nothing, by the way. The person gets mad for 10 seconds, and that's it. We're off to the pumpkin patch.
God, everyone doesn't think like you, bro.
I know.
Otherwise, there'd be problems.
Bro, I know. You're right. I agree with that.
The downfall of society starts with Echo Charles's.
But
you know what you are? You're doing like little conniving driving. It's not even road rage, just like little sneaking around.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like conniving, because just like these leaders that you're talking about, to get into that position where I can kind of justify it to myself, I have this long history of uninterrupted just etiquette driving. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, so you feel like you get a pass once in a while.
Little bit, once a year on the pumpkin patch. That's what it feels like.
Have you noticed, for real, if you're late for whatever reason, you probably don't care if you're late for anything.
Not as much, no.
But if I happen to be late or running late, every car is slow. Every stoplight turns red. Like, everything sucks.
So what do you do? Your
I
behavior
leave
stays
early.
the same.
No, I leave early.
But let's say you're, look, 1 in the trillion times that you're heading somewhere, you're kind of late, and obviously the cars are slow and all this stuff. What do you do? Nothing. Suck it up.
I literally think to myself, this is my fault, and you have to deal with the consequences. That's all there is to it.
You're a good man.
All right. Moving on. You remember such saying as red sky at night, sailor's delight. This means a lot to some of us, but do you think any meteorologist makes his predictions by stepping out the door and looking at the color of the sky? Again, it's just like a catchphrase thing. He's trying to remind you of that. A third characteristic of the principles of war is that they are assumptions, and they are rather abstract assumptions at that. Fourth, the principles of war are neither sacred nor immutable. Anyone who ever wrote a list of principles of war says that his list is it. Just from the fact that the lists have changed so much brings this viewpoint into question, as you will see when I show you some of the lists of principles of war and how much they can vary. There's a whole idea, like, this is a Navy dude. Mm-hmm. There's a whole theme in this talk, basically, that the Navy is like, look, you can't just put rules out there. Like you can have some ideas, some principles, maybe guidelines, but that's about it. That's kind of the Navy attitude, and we'll get to that. Going on further, there are some dangers of using the principles of war. The first danger is that they rest on assumptions, on the assumption that all wars are alike, both as to cause, objects, and methods. Well, there you go. That's kind of crazy, right? Mm-hmm. A second great danger, and this is probably the greatest danger, is that they lead to an a priori reasoning. A priori reasoning deduces consequences from principles assumed as self-evident and is derived independently of factual observation. Obviously, however, your first principle must be correct. Basically, they say like, oh, you're going to do this thing based on this principle. But the principle that you're basing it on, which you assume it's self-evident, you assume it's obvious, but it's actually just someone else's idea. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's kind of messed up. Mm-hmm. So be careful of that. And then he says, another danger of using these principles of war is that they tend to lead to oversimplification. This is because they are catchwords. It's easy to oversimplify. It's easy to say, I've got mass, I've got security, I shall therefore win, without seriously considering the situation. Without really knowing what the situation is, you may think you have these things, but you haven't thought it out. So beware of oversimplification. You ever heard the MMA math, like A beats B, B beats C, C beats A? Mm-hmm. You see a lot of this in MMA because there's a whole slew of variables that you just don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. You just don't know. And if I bet on the UFC over the years, I don't bet on the UFC. Very rarely. I should say very rarely. Because occasionally I'll still be like, yo. Yeah. But there's a couple times where I have bet, not specifically on the UFC, but on MMA in general, where I thought I was just like putting money in the bank. Yeah. Putting money in the bank, dude. Yeah. And then just lost. And been, totally confused. I'm talking like guys that I had trained with. Yeah. Guys that I'd had insider info. Yeah. Can you get arrested for that? No, that's like Wall Street. Insider info, because back in the day in MMA, we all knew each other. Like we were probably 2 degrees of separation from any UFC fighter. Yeah. Seriously, back in the 90s, probably 2, maybe 3 degrees of separation. We had Brazilian connections, we had American connections, we had wrestling connections, we had Sambo connections, we had all kinds of connections. So we were like 2-3 people away from just about every fighter that there was. And I'm sure we could go down the list and I could be proven wrong. But it certainly seemed like a lot of fighters we were connected to. Oh, yeah. I mean, whole camps that we knew people from. Yeah. And so you got a whole camp that you know everybody in that camp and you get second word and this guy's injured, he's got a bad this, he's good at this, that guy can't. Like, you'd find that stuff out. And a couple times I found that stuff out. I thought I was like, oh, man, I got the insider. In fact, I don't have any good insider stories where I thought, oh, I got the insider information, I'm going to bet, and I won. Never ever. That has not happened to me. I've had insider information and lost. Total upsets. Yeah. Totally didn't see it coming.
It's kind of like SEAL training, kind of, right?
Very similar. Very similar.
You just never know.
Yeah, so that's the way it is. You have these principles, but you can't put 100% faith in them because there's other things out there. Like the dude's just got an iron chin. Yeah. Or the dude's got crazy strength, or he's got wicked flexibility, or he's got a torn, groin muscle. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Yeah. Can have an impact. Yes. Oh, then you find out he's got a torn groin muscle, but then you also find out he's like a physical mutant that doesn't care about pain. Yeah. You didn't know that part. So you bet against him, he doesn't care. Yeah. All right, next up. Another danger is that war cannot be fought mechanically by a book of rules. Here is a quote about the enemies of a great general. Napoleon's opponents moved their men on the chessboard according to the rules which they took for immutable principles, and the game went on so long as their antagonists were also guided by them. But when the adversary appeared, who only awaited the development of their methodical movements to play his own secret, profound, and decisive game, all equality of chances disappeared, and the only variety in the result was the mode of defeat. So here's the rules. This is like what happened with MMA. We're boxer versus boxer. That's the fight. Then it was boxer versus Hoist Gracie. Mm-hmm. What's that guy's name? Art Jimerson. Oh, yeah. Right? Yeah. One boxing glove on. And I think in the interviews, he's like, well, how is this guy even going to touch me? Yeah. I'm going to jab him. Yeah. Like, I'm fast. And that guy, I think that guy was a ranked boxer, by the way. Mm. And no one just ever changed levels, grabbed your legs, and took you to the ground. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So thinking that you're just going to follow the rules, no. Goes on to say the key word here, and we have all noticed it, immutable. I don't believe that a principle of war can be said to be immutable. Immutability leads to inflexibility. Here's a quote from Admiral C.R. Brown. Adherence to one principle frequently demands violation of another. Any leader who adheres to who adheres inflexibly to one set of commandments is inviting disastrous defeat from a resourceful opponent. Notice that's an admiral. It's a Navy guy that's saying that. Now there's yet another danger. This is that the principles of war can lead to a blindness to the real situation. They tend to lead people into preconceived ideas about what the situation is by blindly following the principles of war rather than into considering what the situation actually is. And this has happened frequently. Oh yeah. This is when you look, pattern recognition is great. It really helps you. But if you start overlaying the pattern onto the situation and kind of making the marks of what you see, not what's actually happening, that's an issue. That's a big issue. Going on, however, there are some values to the principles of war. I don't want you to think that they're all wrong. The first value is that they help to get us thinking about war. If we think about the principles of war, not merely repeat them or memorize them, but think about them, this is good. We are thinking about war. If we are continually testing them, seeing if they do apply, testing to see whether or not a principle applies in a historical situation, then we are thinking about war and we are thinking about the situation. So there are some benefits. And it's nice to have a framework to look and say like, oh yeah, they should be doing this, but you can see they're a little bit outside of it. Instead of saying, oh, they're doing that, that's what they're doing. The principles of war have one other value. They may help to keep us on the right track, perhaps. They at least help to keep us from getting off track. Okay. So that's good. Good information. And then I'm going to fast forward a bit. He starts getting into some of the examples of the principles of war around the world. The first one that he starts with is Sun Tzu. We've covered Sun Tzu on this podcast. He talks about Sun Tzu having 13 principles of war. He's like, I couldn't find them. And he goes through the 13. There's 13 chapters. But he says laying plans is not a principle of war. Classification of terrain is not a principle of war. The army on the march is not a principle of war. The use of spies is not a principle of war. What he does come up with is the 5 essentials for victory. And these are some of the popular ones that you always hear quoted from Sun Tzu. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. That's accurate. He will win who knows how to handle both superior and inferior forces. Very accurate. He will win whose army is animated by the same spirit throughout all ranks. Watch out, America. He will win who prepared himself waits to take the enemy unprepared. And then the last one, he will win who has military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign. Meaning don't micromanage me, civilian dudes. You want me to win? I'll win. I'll tell you when we're done. I don't need you, President Johnson, calling over to Vietnam, telling us what targets to strike. We don't need you to do that. You want us to win, we'll win. Otherwise, back off. So there's Sun Tzu. The next one he talks about is Clausewitz. And we haven't covered Clausewitz on the podcast, and I guess I'm biased against Clausewitz, to be honest with you.
Why?
B.H. Liddell Hart. I'm more about that. I'm more about that indirect approach. I'm more about that B.H. Liddell Hart. And the other reason, I think in the beginning it was because it was so common, so popular. I was like, everybody kind of knows this. We should probably do it at some point. I'm not that biased against him. There's always lessons to learn, right?
Sure.
So here's Clausewitz's 4 rules. No major disagreements here. Use our entire forces with the utmost energy. Okay? Concentrate our power as much as possible against the section where the chief blows are to be delivered and incur disadvantages elsewhere. It's concentration of power. Which, by the way, is prioritize and execute. Never waste time. Surprise through swiftness. And follow up our successes with utmost energy. goes on to say, now at this point I would like to digress a little bit. In Colonel Langston's lecture, you were told that Clausewitz said that war was an extension of politics by other means. This may well be true, but I would like to point out that Sir Walter Raleigh said that war is the failure of politics. I must say, a little bit more accurate, right? Mm-hmm. Now you get these freaking idiots in the government, and they're ready to press the war button like in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we have a disagreement with somebody. Oh, let's attack them.
Right.
These are what the idiots do.
Yeah, right. It's kind of defeats the purpose, right? Kind of a thing.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why they make that move. Number one, they make that move because they don't have any kids that are going to war.
Yeah, but like how you say, like politics is...
Also, they own a bunch of freaking military, defense companies.
Yeah, defeats the purpose,
So
like I said. Like if you're here, if your job is, if you just said political, the reasons politics exist is so you don't have to go to war, right? So hey, look, and even on a person-to-person level, like, hey, let's diplomatically resolve this, so we don't have to fight. Mm-hmm. Now, if my diplomatic approach is to fight, bruh, it kind of defeats the purpose of having a diplomatic purpose.
100%.
See what I'm saying? So yeah, man. So essentially, we gotta expect more out of these politic-type people, politicians.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're terrible. Terrible. All right. So there you had Clausewitz. Now we get into British Army. And look, I'm not reading this guy's whole speech. I'm just reading some sections of it. British Army Principles, JFC Fuller, 1912, put these principles, or put the British Army Field Service Regulations book in 1920. They put these principles in there. These are also the basis for the U.S. Army's list of principles. But here's the British Army Principles of War. Selection and maintenance of aims. Which, by the way, that's a long way of saying objective. So the selection and maintenance of aim. So know what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. So pick out your aim, what your objective is, and then keep going towards the same thing. Mm-hmm. Next one is offensive action. Cool. Be on offense. Next one is administration, which in America we call that logistics. Cooperation. Cooperation. That's covered move, by the way. Concentration of forces, it's prioritized next to you. Economy of effort, prioritized next to you. Flexibility, yes, great thing to have. Surprise, yes, great thing to have. Security, yes, great thing to have. Maintenance of morale. So there's the British. Next come the U.S. Army principles. There are 9 of them. And he says, if you rearrange this list, you can form an acronym for remembering the Army Principles of War. This acronym is MOSCOMS. If you want to remember principles of war, it's a good way, perhaps, but I'm not so sure you should memorize lists of principles. This guy's got more of an open mind. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's strange that some people have an open mind naturally and some people have a closed mind naturally. Yeah. I mean, you can hear Jordan Peterson talk about this, right? It's one of the components, the big 5 components of psychology. Yeah. So, and you meet people like this all the time. You meet people on all over this spectrum, right? Yeah. So here's the U.S. Army Principles of War, and we've covered these before. Objective, and that's, again, the same as aim. Like, make sure you know what your objective is. Offensive, mass, economy of force, maneuver, unity of command, security, surprise, simplicity. And we're going to get into some details. If you're wondering, like, what do these things all mean? We'll get into it. Next, we have the U.S. Air Force Principles of War. The Air Force takes a little bit of a different stand. General Muir S. Fairchild, who is the first commanding general of the Air University, refused to allow blind acceptance of any principles of war. He later became vice chief of the Air Staff, and in this position still maintained that we can't have principles as official doctrines which would be followed blindly. He desired no blind acceptance. He insisted that each principle has to be restudied constantly in terms of the situation. So he has a more open mind. Here's the U.S. Air Force Principles of War. Objective, offensive, cooperation, concentration, economy, surprise, security, mobility, simplicity. And now we get into the U.S. Navy. And remember, the guy that's writing this is at the time a lieutenant commander. He eventually becomes an admiral. He says the U.S. Navy didn't have a list of principles of war until fairly recently. And this is written in 1963. In fact, as recently as 1953, there was no official doctrine nor official publication which promulgated a list of U.S. Navy principles of war. In 1953, apparently under the pressure of unification, Admiral R.L. Connolly, who is president of the Naval War College, wrote a list of principles which he published in the Naval Institute Proceedings. That's a magazine. In his article, he said that under unification, it seemed as if we were going to have a list of principles of war, and submitted a suggested list. Now, there are quite a few reasons why navies have never accepted lists of principles of war. For instance, here's a quote from a British general written a few months after Gallipoli, in which the British tried to get around the stalemate of the Western Front by applying sea power and going to the flanks. He said, "Sea power and command of the sea are colossal assets. Yet sea power is also a great seducer from the principles of war," meaning you think you don't need to use them if you've got like some big sea power. The Army and the Navy approach of the principles of war, the Army and the Navy approach the principles of war differently. This is what the Army says about the principles of war. Quote, "The principles of war are fundamental truths governing the prosecution of war. Their proper application is essential to the exercise of command and to successful conduct of military operations. These principles are interrelated and, dependent on the circumstances, may tend to reinforce one another or to be in conflict. Consequently, the degree of application of any specific principle will vary with the situation." So they do recognize that there's a dichotomy with some of these things. There's decisions that you have to make, but they do call them fundamental truths that govern the prosecution of war. Those are strong words. Here's what the Navy says. Quote, "Principles of war were first formulated in an era when the movements of forces and logistics support were operations much more simple than they are in the 20th century. They were intended originally as a guide to conduct land warfare. The principles described briefly in this appendix do not agree with any standard list either in number or titles. Rather, they represent observations relating to principles of war which appear to be applicable in some degree to naval warfare." So he's like basically saying, yeah, in some times there might be a possibility that this could have an impact. They are not listed in any particular order since relative importance will vary according to the nature of a given situation. These principles, which are somewhat interdependent, are suggested as general guides useful for study rather than as immutable doctrine or as infallible laws guaranteed to produce definite results. Since war is not a precise science, there is no standard formula for translating any set of principles into action. Interpretation and adaptation must necessarily be made against the background of past successes or failures in war and in the light of the evolutionary nature of technology, naval doctrine, and national policy. And this is what I find pretty shocking to this day, is people think they know what's going to happen in a war. They think they know what's going to happen. And you don't know what's going to happen. There's factors, just like an MMA fight. There's factors you cannot comprehend. There's things that you don't understand. And because of that, you're going to have to make some decisions. And when you make those decisions, those are going to further impact the variables that you're facing. So on paper, who wins? On paper, who wins? This guy or this guy? Oh, well, it's going to be this guy. Well, you can't say that. And by the way, that's an MMA. And while MMA has less rules than boxing, MMA has infinitely more rules than war. Mm-hmm. War has no rules. Virtually no rules. I mean, the number of rules in war is tiny. Mm-hmm. So there's so many things that can happen. And by the way, guess what you can do? Break rules. What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. Like if you're in an MMA fight and you pull out a knife and stab somebody in the neck, you're going to get arrested. You're going to jail. The fight's over.
Yeah, it's different.
If you're in war and you're fighting another country and you decide you're going to use a chemical weapon and you kill, what are they going to do? You're already at war.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought about that too, where you know how like certain countries have certain rules for the way they do war and like all this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, it doesn't, just like how you said, the rules don't matter, and they really, for real, in real life, do not matter. And this is why. Because if we, we're trying to win this war, and then, I have this rogue element that does some inhumane stuff and some stuff that breaks the laws of war. All the damage that they do to the enemy, no matter how illegal, still counts. And it counts towards your war effort.
Yep.
In MMA, it don't. Like if you bust out a knife, stab them, put it back, no one saw it till they played the replay. Oh, your win does not count. Doesn't count. You're disqualified. In fact, you lose automatic.
Yep.
In real war, it doesn't work like that. The damage you do counts.
And the retaliation is going to count too.
Oh, it's all
so
part of the
that
gig.
was the rogue element over there. You're like, that rogue element's part of your gig. So watch this.
Yep. It all counts.
So and when I say we, I mean America looks at these situations on paper all the time. And they're like, yo, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's, what about, that'll never happen again. That'll never happen again. I was explaining when you go to see the Vietnam War Memorial. Have you been there? Mm-mm. So it's a big, giant V-shaped wall. But when the beginning of the wall, when you start, so you walk along the wall, and it's got all the names, the black man, all the names are carved in it. Well, when you walk, as you get to it, you start like it's a little sidewalk, and there's a little wall, and it's probably like, I don't know, 6 inches tall, and it's got like 4 names, and you keep walking, and so it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, and then you keep walking towards the angle, like the vortex of the V. And as you walk, it gets taller and taller and taller. So finally, when you get to the main, to where the two legs of the V meet, it's over your head and it's covered with names. And this is what happens with America and wars. It's like starts off with like, there's, we deployed some forces and they're not going to be engaged in combat. They're just advisors. And we're just doing some logistical support. That's what's always saying. I heard this on the news the other day. They're like, this is not a combat deployment. It's just 2,000 soldiers are going over into the vicinity. They're not going to be actually in combat. You're like, oh, okay. I've heard this before. And then you look up and all of a sudden you're embroiled in another giant war. That's what happened in Vietnam. So and we get lulled into it. And by the way, the whole thing of like, they actually attacked our guys. Well, our guys were there. That's why they got attacked. If they weren't there, they wouldn't have got attacked. But what politician is like, well, if they get attacked, we'll send more. And by the way, I own a decent amount of stock in these various military industrial companies. And they make bullets. And when we shoot bullets, those guys got to make more bullets. It's the way it works. Is it all like that? No, it's not all like that. But does that weigh? I mean, think if you own a company, right? Think if you own a company. You're a nice guy, Echo Charles. Echo Charles is a pretty nice guy. And think if you made hamburgers and you were at the fair. Yeah. You're at the fair and you're selling hamburgers. And all of a sudden there was like the other burger place, they had like a little fire. Now it was getting into your line. And you had a fire extinguisher, Yeah. You may or may not decide I'm going to help them put their fire out.
Yeah, fully.
Now listen, you're a nice guy. You'd probably be like, oh, hey, here's a fire extinguisher. But let's say that other hamburger stand was like where you couldn't really see them. And you didn't know them. Yeah. And instead of just selling burgers for like, you're going to make an extra $700 that day. What if you were going to make 700 billion? Or sorry, let's say 700 million.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
fully.
Dude, you might even be like, hey, let's put some matches over in that area. You see what I'm saying? It's a lot of money people are starting to deal with.
Bruh, I knew this lady, and she was part owner of a satellite cell phone provider service. They sold the cell phones, and they sold plans with these satellite phones. They work anywhere, right? Under all circumstances, kind of a thing. And I heard this freaking chick say, for, you know, in regards to like sales, like we need to boost our sales, all this stuff. She's like, shoot, you know what we need? Another natural disaster. That's what we need. She literally said that out loud.
I'm telling you, man.
It's that mindset. Right
Was she an evil person?
Oh, well, you know.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, but she's a woman. She had like a wife. She had a husband and she had kids. Like she's a normal person.
I'm sure she has.
But she wants some new Mercedes.
Yeah.
And she's like, yo, we can make the next quarters. If we just have a nice little hurricane, we need those sat phones. Those cell towers get knocked out.
Bruh.
So imagine if you could kind of like steer things.
Yeah, that's spooky because that's a lot of things.
Yeah, it's because that's what the thing is. You got to remember there's like this isn't like someone goes, look, I want to start a war. They don't do that. Yeah. But their reaction to like, oh, there's turmoil, the reaction instead of being like, hey, maybe we should just like, and in fact, it's like there's turmoil. They could say, hey, that's not really our business. That's not, you know, we should kind of stay out of what they've got going on. Instead they go, you know, we should help them. It's actually what they say, right? Yeah. We should help them. Yeah. Well, how should we help them? Well, I mean, let's at least give them the supplies that they need. Well, what supplies do they need? They need bullets. Don't you make bullets? Well, yeah.
I know a guy.
I mean, I do, but that's not what I'm saying. We should help them just on the spirit. Yeah. Okay, so you can't argue with that. Now, again, when you look at the world and you go, hey, there's places that need help, right? But a classic example was Rwanda. When the Rwanda massacre took place, and I was off the coast on a ship with a SEAL platoon, that massacre was happening. And we definitely could have gone in there and stopped it. We could have saved, 800,000 people got killed. We could have saved, let's say we saved 1,000 people, right? We didn't go in. Why didn't we go in? Because Somalia had just happened. Black Hawk Down had just happened. And they're like, hey, we're not sending you guys in there. A couple elements, Marine Corps went in there with a couple elements to like do a little bit of relief and they came right back out. So we had like a bad memory. America had a bad memory and, you know, they're like, don't really need to... You know, don't really need none of that right now. So we'll just kind of hold what we got. But then you fast forward 10 years, you have the same situation. Someone's like, hey, man, we could help those people out. I bet you, you know, if that would have happened, I think that was like 1994, I think it was 1994, the Rwanda. And Black Hawk Down, it happened in 93. So I bet you if it was like 97, a few more years, I bet we would have gone in and done something to help them. But we didn't. So there's all these little factors when people are making decisions, and one of those factors is a little bit in the back of their head. Maybe, look, some of them I'm sure are evil. They're just like, let's go to war and I'll make more money. Yeah. Some of them are just like, well, you know, it is the right thing to do. It's defend their, you know, whatever cause, and we can help, and there's turmoil, and we should at least make sure, you know, like that's what we do. There's a little something in the back of their head making that decision.
Yeah, that money piece is like hard to ignore as being a factor. You know, in an individual's decision making.
Oh yeah.
Like if some conflict, they said on like, remember Blood? You ever watch the movie Blood Diamond, where he was he was explaining it or whatever. He's like, so they're not starting wars for money, but they find themselves in a situation where it pays to keep it going. You know, so it's like one of those things. So it's like I don't have to actively do anything, but at the same time I don't want to actively do anything to stop it because it kind of pays to keep it going, kind of a thing. Like, man, how hard is it to ignore that as a factor? It's the same thing with like, you know, like pharmaceuticals and stuff. Like if you have like type 2 diabetes medication or something, you know, and they say this all the time where it's like, hey, they don't want you to be healthy, they want you to come back for the you know, for
that's a great example. Do you really want that person to go on a keto, like start working out? Because you can reverse that. I'm not a medical doctor, but I know people reverse type 2 diabetes by going on a strict like ketogenic diet and starting to work out and exercise, and they become no longer type 2 diabetic. Yeah, that happens. Does the insulin dealer want that to happen? No, hell no. So they're like, when you're leaving the doctor, they're like, hey, here's a cookie. Yeah. Here's a lollipop. Here's a cookie and another prescription for insulin.
Isn't it weird that how when you leave the doctor as a kid even, they give you a lollipop? It's crazy, right? Like something that'll literally make you less healthy. As you leave the doctor, they give it to you when you leave. Dang. That goes deep, man.
All right, so that's what we're dealing with here. Yeah, the first principle of war should be avoid it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bruce Lee, right? The art of fighting without fighting.
Art of fighting without fighting, but these guys are idiots. So their first principle of war is also one that gets left out all the time. Objective. So these are the U.S. Navy principles of war. Objective, morale, simplicity, control, offensive, exploitation, mobility, concentration, economy, surprise, security, and readiness. And we're going to jump into those a little bit deeper, but for comparison, he says, let's take a look at the Russian principles of war. And here they are. And I wasn't going to cover these, but you'll see why I had to. Russian principles of war. Advance and consolidation. Offensive. Combined arms. Concentration. Economy of force. Maneuver and initiative. Surprise and deception. Adequate reserves. Morale. And annihilation. So there you go. They have a principle of war that's called annihilation. That should make everybody, say, I don't know, like Paul Harris. Remember the MMA fighter Paul Harris?
Paul Harris, yeah.
Because he would annihilate people's knees with a heel hook.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not
wrong. Dude, he got kicked out of the UFC forever.
Yeah.
Because he didn't let go of heel hooks.
Mm-hmm.
He had a principle of annihilation. Like, I'm going to get you and I'm going to hurt you.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys are like, dude, I want to fight this guy.
Yeah.
So I bet that you see the principles of war is annihilation. People look at Russia like, dude, I don't know if we need to get into this. I don't know if I want that beef.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so now they go into the little bit deeper dive. The first one is objective. Here's what Admiral Brown says about the objective. The objective is unquestionably the most important of all principles of war. It is the connecting link which alone can impart coherence to war. Without the objective, all other principles are pointless. It gives the commander the what. The other principles are guides in the how. So this is a really good thing to think about in your life. You need to know where you're going. You need to know what your unified strategic goal is. You got to figure out where you're going. In your team, you got to figure out what it is. I had a board meeting yesterday with one of the companies I'm on the board of, and we were having a great conversation. And all of a sudden, I realized that we were like this. The whole conversation was splintering in a couple different directions. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Hold on a second. What is the objective?" And they're like, "What?" I said, "What? Like what? Why would you make that decision? Why would you make this decision? Why would you make that decision? What is the ultimate goal? What is our overall objective?" And I was it with a whiteboard and put like a thing at the top of the what is it we're trying to get done? Mm-hmm. What do you guys want to do? And then they put it out there. It's like, okay, now we can start to see how these different decisions will lead to this objective. Mm-hmm. If we don't know what the objective is, we really can't make any decisions. Yeah. So, great thing to think about in everything that you're trying to do in your life. And I like what the Brits say, right? It's the aim and the maintenance. Because people get sidetracked, right? Yeah. They're like, oh, I want to achieve this goal, but then they get distracted. They try and achieve something else. They try to achieve something else. You need to figure out what your objective is and then try and maintain it. Now, I will say this. Sometimes you got to adjust your goal. This is what B.H. Liddell Hart. Like sometimes your objective needs to change. And you look around and be like, oh, this ain't working. I'm going to try something else. That's okay too. But you need to be conscious of it. That's the main thing. People go into a zombie-like slumber maneuvering through the world without knowing where they're actually going. If you need to change where you're going, that's fine. But you need to be aware of that. The next principle we will take up is the principle of morale. We all have our own idea of what morale is. I'll give you the definition. Morale is the general spirit or state of mind of an individual or a group of individuals as reflected in behavior under various conditions. Important to keep morale up. Doesn't really talk about in this speech how to do it. That's on the commanders, I guess, but you might want to get some wins. You might want to give ownership. There's a bunch of ways you can help out with morale. Little wins go a long way. Little wins go a long way. That hurts when you're in a wrestling tournament. Well, it's good, depending on who you are. But if you're the number one seed Guess who your first match is against? The number 64 seed.
Oh,
You're just going to go murk somebody. Like the number 1 seed in a wrestling tournament against the number 64, like in a high school tournament, the number 64 seed doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's going to get murked.
I wonder why they do that like that.
They basically carve out easier paths for the people that are highly seeded.
Because in track, if you're like in the finals, they base it on kind of like that system. It's slightly different, but it's more or less the same. Where if you're seeded like number 1, you get your first choice of lane.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so it's less of a factor because track, the lane is less of a factor than who your first match is. That's a big deal.
But what about those like college track tournaments when there's you have to do multiple races to get through, and they do that in the Olympics too, right? You got to win multiple races to get to the finals.
Yeah. But it's not.
So I wonder if they rack
day.
And stack that thing too.
Yeah. So if you and it depends on the thing. I don't know how they do it in the Olympics, but if they do it like how we did, they go whoever had the best time. So let's say it's 100-meter dash, right?
Well, that's
you
a
got
ranking, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's how they see. So yeah, if you get the best time, you get in your next heat, you get number 1 pick of your lane.
Yeah.
Same deal on the semifinals, same deal on the final. So if you had the best time, you check number 1.
Check. So what I was going to say about that is those little wins, you have good morale going into the finals.
Yeah.
Other people got smashed. Their morale's going down. So people quit wrestling. They're like, I'm done with this.
Pays to be a winner, I guess.
Pays to be a winner. You ever heard that thing about if you put like they put 2 rats in a tube and they have to fight each other, and like the one that wins has like a 70% chance, or I don't know what the number is, but a massive percent more chance of winning. Yeah. You see that with little kids.
Yeah, fully.
Like in jiu-jitsu tournaments, that kid wins, they get all amped. Next principle is simplicity. Simplicity is clarity. We need simplicity in plans, strategy, weapons, and command. One man should serve one master. The nature of simplicity is relative, however. What is simple for a well-trained force may be very complex for a poorly trained force. We should avoid oversimplification at the expense of accuracy, completeness, and flexibility. There is such a thing as being too simple. So this is why we wrote the book, The Dichotomy of Leadership. And this is one of those ones where when I first wrote down the 4 laws of combat leadership that you can read about in any of my books, I made those up from what I experienced. I didn't dive into history and look through to see. Otherwise, I would have maybe been driven by some of these things that we're reading right now. Yeah. Simple was my own. Now, I had heard keep it simple, stupid in the SEAL teams. Like there's a cover move. I had heard it. And so like, I'm not saying I made these things up. Right. But when I wrote them down, what was going to be important, after a few months, I was like, damn, I'm teaching this stuff to everyone. Like, I need to make sure that these are good principles. I know they work for what we're doing. Yeah. And sure enough, simplicity is on every one of these lists. It's almost always on a principles of war to keep things simple. So that's a fact. Next up, the 4th principle is that of control. In the U.S. Navy, control, which replaces cooperation, coordination, and command, found in other lists of the principles of war, is composed of 4 elements: command and organization, in which the chain of command responsible is thoroughly defined; efficient communications to serve command; training and indoctrination; and professionally competent leadership. So that's what they mean by control. They're talking about communication. They're talking about having a good, clear chain of command. They're making sure that everyone understands. They're making sure that these girls are well trained. That's a lot of things to be covered by command. Next principle is the principle of the offensive. The offensive is the act of seeking to obtain control not previously held. Navy doctrine states that victory can never be won by passive defense. Only sustained offensive action brings success. Check. I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to defend than it is to attack in a lot of cases, but none of these things are immutable. Yeah, we want to be on the offense. Are there times where being on defense works better? Yep. No doubt about it. I mean, look at Muhammad Ali doing that rope-a-dope on defense for 7 rounds, and then just crack. You know what I'm saying? He's wearing you out. Yeah. So there are times when this is the opposite. Most of the time, I want to keep my opponent guessing most of the time. Some of the time, I want to see what they got. We're going to make adjustments. Again, it's important to be aware of these things. If you're not thinking about these things, then you might be doing something like a zombie, right? You're going through and you're doing what you're doing without thinking and being aware of what's happening. Yeah. That's a problem. Going through the motions is a problem when it comes to leading a team. Like, oh, this is just where we're going. No, where are we going? And is this the best way to get there? The sixth principle is exploitation. Exploitation is following up success. It is closely allied to the principle of offensive and to the principle of surprise, and it's closely associated with momentum also. Plans and operation must be flexible enough to take advantage of local successes or situations, or to follow up. And actually, just FYI, the part of this speech that I'm not reading, he gives historical cases. In this particular case, he says an example of failure to follow this principle is the failure of Union General Meade after Gettysburg. He defeated Lee at Gettysburg, but he didn't follow up. Some modern historians say that he never had a chance to follow up, but the point is that he never seriously tried to. He left Gettysburg much too late to chase Lee. So there you go. And I just came back from Gettysburg. And, bro, asking General Meade and the Union forces to go and chase after they just had this complete and utter bloodbath, it's asking a lot there, bro. Mobility is the next principle. Mobility implies rapidity plus flexibility plus endurance. Don't confuse mobility with speed, because mobility has also the element of endurance. Endurance is achieved through logistical support. For the Navy, mobility replaces maneuver, which is essentially a tactical term, and movement, which is essentially a strategic term and includes endurance. Got to be able to move. I agree with this one. Got to be able to move. Your mind, your brain. You got to be able to see things from a different perspective. You have to be able to maneuver your way of thinking. The eighth principle is concentration. Concentration implies superior force at the defensive point, concentration implies superior force at the decisive point at the proper time. Incidentally, you'll notice the word implies. We can't say equals, because these aren't principles of natural science, and we can't say that there is any mathematical proportion to be found in these principles. Concentration is used in the Navy instead of mass or superiority because of its connotation of decisiveness in time and space. This is also, concentration is, this is prioritize and execute. Because you have a lot of things going on in the battlefield, and you got to okay, this is the thing we need to focus on. This is where we need to put our forces. That's what concentration is. And it also includes economy, because I can't spread a bunch of plus. I need to use what I can now for the right thing, right reasons. Economy is the next principle. Economy implies an economical use of forces and a judicious expenditure of resources in order to achieve maximum efforts. What that means is that we can't be strong everywhere. We must be strong in some places, but we can't be strong in all places. Again, prioritize and execute. The 10th principle is surprise. Surprise is confrontation of the enemy with force he is not prepared to meet. Fair enough. Clausewitz was enamored of surprise. And of course, many battles have been won through its use. But surprise can be intoxicating. One may get so wrapped up in the contemplation of what his surprise will do to the enemy that he will be surprised himself in the meantime. Isn't it interesting? You can think of every one of these things works in jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like economy, like saving your energy. Surprise, obvious. Surprise can be achieved through originality, audacity, speed, secrecy, concealment, or deception. All those work in jiu-jitsu, by the way. Mm-hmm. And don't forget that the principle of exploitation is closely allied to the principle of surprise. Be prepared to follow up. Sure enough. The next principle is security. Security implies anticipating and minimizing unproductive loss resulting from enemy action. This is one of the weirdest. This is the one that I was kind of like, okay, so I'm going to read that again. Security implies anticipating and minimizing unproductive loss resulting from any action. So you don't want the enemy to do things that jacks you up. Cool. Security gives us freedom of action, but we can't be secure everywhere. We have to use forces economically, and it is well to remember that sometimes security can be achieved better by offensive measures than by defensive measures. Yeah, I don't know. I think that one's a lot of stuff to think about on that one. Or let me rephrase that. A lot of stuff covers security. Maybe it's just too obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea of keeping things and yourself safe, like that's security, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, don't do some, you know what? And it said this basically, like sometimes a good offense or a good defense is a good offense, right? So keeping yourself safe isn't, this is like a big political argument too, right? Where it's like, hey, keeping yourself safe isn't, locking up all the doors and hopefully no one will get you. It's to have the capability to actively keep yourself safe, kind of a thing.
Proactively patrol your neighborhood.
Yeah, so safety is the idea of safety. That's what you do, whatever. But safety is just the idea of being safe. You don't always, to keep yourself overall safe doesn't necessarily mean defense. See what I'm saying? I guess that's what.
Give me a jiu-jitsu example of security. I guess it would be like keep your elbows in.
Yeah.
Right?
So, and you do this too. Like, if someone gets mount on you, if I get mount on you, you're the different, keeping yourself safe while you're in mount is like, there's a lot of different approaches to that depending on what they're doing, So if I'm there, have established position, all the stuff, trying to go for your arms, you're going to keep your elbows in, you're going to have that defensive safety. But if you want to stay in mount, if you don't want to stay in mount for 10 minutes, you better start doing something else, kind of a thing. So there's different approaches to quote unquote safety, or in this case, security is what he's saying. That's what I got from it.
No, there you go. We'll take it. Napoleon had this to say about security. A great captain ought to say to himself several times a day, if the enemy appears in front, on my right, or on my left, how shall I act? If he finds himself in want of answers, he's ill-prepared. I used to literally tell guys this. Like, you're out on patrol, every step you take, you should be like, all right, if we get attacked over there, I see a ravine over there we can get into. Oh, we can get the high ground right over there. If we get hit right here, if we get hit from the left, I can do this. You should be thinking about that stuff all the time. Just contingency planning in your head.
Yeah.
As a leader out on patrol, and as everybody out on patrol.
Yeah, so even if you're talking about the idea of safety or security, aka safety, it's like body armor, for example, and I'm going off of what you guys have been saying for years. Body armor, it's like heavy. Actually, this might have been Jody Minnick. I'm not sure. Anyway, body armor, it's like, okay, it's way heavier, or a bunch of bullets. Actually, this one's better, right? Where you have too many bullets, that kind of limits your mobility, limits your endurance, all this stuff. So you're more mobile with less bullets, but at the same time, the more bullets you have, the more you can shoot people. So it's like that balance, like depending on what you're doing, But either way, the idea of security or safety has to factor into your decision making, kind of a thing. It's not something that you're just not going to think about, is what I'm saying. So that's why it's what it seems like. Why it seems like he included it in there.
And those are great examples because, when they talk about the dichotomy, that's a great dichotomy.
Yeah.
Do we want to have firepower and longevity, endurance, or do we want to be able to move?
Yeah.
Because you can get so heavy, dude, it's hard to move.
Yeah.
But you can also run out of bullets.
Yeah.
You don't want to be running out of bullets, but you don't want to not be able to move. So what are we going to do? To find that balance.
Yeah.
Got to analyze what that mission consists of. Yeah. That's how we're making decisions here. All right. The last principle is readiness. There are 5 types of readiness: command readiness, intelligence readiness, personnel readiness, plans readiness, and logistics readiness. Command readiness requires an adequate organization and trained staff and leaders. Fair enough. Intelligence readiness implies an intelligent structure in being organized and functioning before hostilities commence and maintained afterward. Yeah, you need to be able to gather intel. Personnel readiness comprises in part training programs and personnel replacement plans. Plans readiness implies the availability of plans for anticipated operations. Finally, logistics readiness means that we have logistics support ready. We know how we're going to employ it, and we have tested our plans for logistic feasibility. Well, I mean, you know what? again, that's kind of like, you better be thinking about that stuff. I guess that's why it's in here. It's a principle because you better be thinking about these things, because if you're not, you're going to get jacked.
Yeah.
Now, we're getting towards the end of this now. Now, what have I told you in this lecture? I hope I got these points across. First, that the principles of war are not a substitute for logical analysis, common sense, broad professional judgment, and good leadership. Okay, so everyone listen to that. Second, that you can't fight wars by a book of rules, and that reliance on the principles or on just one of them can get you into trouble. Both Napoleon and Hitler observed every one of the principles of war in their invasions of Russia. Obviously, they both did not achieve their goals. A British general said, referring to the principles of war, by themselves, they will not help a soldier to solve a problem of war any more than a knowledge of the principles of painting will. Without steady practice and natural aptitude, enable an artist to paint a picture. That's a great way of laying this out. Yeah. You know, you can watch a YouTube video on how to paint something. You can watch it on how to do a free throw. You can watch on how to play a guitar chord, G chord, C chord. Mm-hmm. You can get on the ukulele. You can look at a YouTube video. You can watch it. Yeah. You can watch it 50 times. Yeah. 50 times on how to do this chord. You still got it. You won't be able to do it at first. Yeah. You're going to have to try it. And you're going to have to drill it. Mm-hmm. And that's the way life is. You got to try things. You got to work at them.
It's the way gymnastics is too, by the way. So if you watch a YouTube video of a girl doing a double pump, triple flip, kick, twist, stick the landing, and she walks you through it. Hey, this is all I did, right? You run, you dump, you twist here, and you do all that stuff. You can't just jump on the mat and do that stuff.
Masterclass has some of that kind of stuff.
What stuff?
Like, they're teaching you sports on Masterclass.
Oh, for real?
And you're going to get tips. But, hey, if you watch Serena Williams teaching you how to serve in tennis on Masterclass,
it's different.
You're not ready for Wimbledon.
No. You're
you know
not,
what I'm saying?
Not, yep.
Now, listen, if you play and you watch her and you get your points, you're like, okay, I could do that. Same thing with my Masterclass. Like, you watch that thing, you can get points. But if you think you're going to roll out of that and be like, okay, I'm good to go now. No, same thing. Yeah. You got to actually go and interact with people, and you got to keep them in mind. And I've been telling people a lot, like, if I'm learning to be a leader, if I'm a new leader, and I'm going to meet with Echo Charles, and you're my subordinate, and I haven't done a lot of these one-on-one meetings, I'm going to actually make some preparatory notes for myself. Yeah. Like, don't get, Echo's a real emotional guy. He's kind of a hothead. Don't get drawn into that. Make sure my ego stays in check, but still make sure I cover some of the shortfalls he has. Boom. Now I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try and get through this. And when I get done, I'm like, dude, I totally got emotional. I got defensive. I didn't finish my you got to write stuff down, and you got to make efforts when you actually do it. Yeah. Leadership, you practice that. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. Like in the SEAL teams, when a guy's a new leader, they can't see what's happening. When you're experienced leader, you're just looking around like, oh yeah, that's what's happening. Yeah. It's so.
Yeah, it's like those.
It's just the way it is.
Those role plays are so valuable in that way. Where you ever took in a course or a class or watched a YouTube instructional of something that you've already done a bunch of times, and so it's essentially you have knowledge through experience only on something, and then you see a YouTube video explaining it on quote unquote on paper, and you learn it way quicker. Because you already know you get better at it way quicker is what I'm saying. Because you know the experience part of it already, and then they just basically align all your pieces to be like, okay, this is kind of correct form or whatever. Yeah. And you already have the experience that you can, like anything, like this whole manual really it's like this framework that you can just start with and be like, hey, if you just followed this framework, you'd be pretty solid.
It's a good place to start, for
exactly right. And the more experience you have, the more knowledge you have, the better quote unquote you get at this, the more you can start to deviate from that framework when you see fit, right? That's essentially how it goes. And how effective you can be, no matter how much you deviate or don't deviate, determines how good you are.
I think that's been huge in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
Because,
big time,
because back in the day, look, you could watch a video, but you had no basis.
Yeah.
You had no framework. Now, and we've talked about this on the Underground podcast when people's like, hey, I live in such and such a place. The closest school is an hour away. What should I do? I can only go there once a week. What should I do? Yep, go there once a week. And then get a buddy and do YouTube videos, or go to BJJ Fanatics, or go to one of these online training things. Because you have the foundation, just like a little framework, you can actually build on it. I mean, when Dean Lister teaches, what would be good? Like if Dean Lister is going to teach how to break open someone's grip in an arm lock. Yeah. If it's your day 3 of jiu-jitsu, you're not going to understand anything that just happened. Yeah. And in the exact same class, a blue belt will be like, oh, this is awesome. I'll be able to use this. And a purple belt will use that in his next roll for real, live.
Yep. Roll it right in.
Roll it right in there.
Yeah, fully. And that's one of the many reasons why jiu-jitsu is such a good example of this life learning process and a lot of other stuff.
Life.
Because you know how it feels to be in that position, so now you can more accurately assess how this new knowledge is going to roll in practice, and that's really what it's all about at the end of the day. No matter how much you learned or didn't learn, or no matter how much you learned on paper, through video, and by experience, it's how are you going to perform in the experience and the performance.
And look, you will be better. Like watching, like I said, Serena Williams, if you're a tennis player. Now, if you've never played tennis before, it's probably not going to be hugely beneficial. Yeah. But if you're a tennis player and she starts saying, hey, make sure on your forehand you do this, you're like, oh, okay, I could probably do that. Or on this approach shot, do this. Or your backhand. Like she can give you legitimate pointers if you have some sort of framework. Now, look, she could probably give you some strategy that you could understand pretty easily whether you played or not, right? She could be like, oh, in this situation, you should do something like this. Mm-hmm. And same thing with these videos nowadays. Like back in the day it was a joke. Back in the day to be like, oh, that guy learned jiu-jitsu on video. Yeah. It was a joke. Mm-hmm. And now people are like, oh yeah, I learned this from whatever, Gordon Ryan's instructional.
Online courses.
He's in there with the shin to shin. Yeah. So, dude, I met Gordon Ryan a few weeks ago. He's a big dude.
Large dude. Yeah.
He's big. Super nice, super cool. But I was like, yeah, he's a big dude. Yeah. Joe Moss.
Sure. Joe Moss
was like, hey, you gotta do a Joe Moss is trying to get he's like, you should do a match against Gordon Ryan. I'm like, Joe, dude. I'm like, hey bro, how about me and Gordon Ryan go bowling?
Yeah. That'd be a solid match. For sure.
Yeah. But people learn directly from video now because they have a fundamental framework. Back in the day, in the 90s, no one had framework. The framework wasn't even there. Yeah. Other than maybe you watch the UFC, but even then you didn't really understand it. Yeah. And there's some people that have a knack for it. Some people have a knack to just learn and create, like Dean Lister. Yeah. He can create things. That's the next level. Yeah. Create things from what exists already.
Yeah, that framework and in the being in the experience kind of scenario, like jiu-jitsu, and this goes to, and I say this about like pretty much even plumbing is like this, where it's like, okay, you have the diagram and you get, okay, this is the move you got to make in this quote unquote diagram. Mm-hmm. If you don't have any experience in it, like you don't even know how it feels to be in that position. Mm-hmm. Like all these external things that are not part of this demonstration or part of this lesson, all the external things that exist when you're in the situation like aren't there. Mm-hmm. So your mind can't like attach it. It's almost like you can't attach the lesson to anything.
There's no scaffolding. There's no framework to attach it to.
It's just an arbitrary lesson.
There's no context. That's like also like with history. Like Daryl Cooper, he can take little things because they're in this context that he has in his mind from reading all these books over all this time. Yeah. So when he learns a new fact, it like fits right into a spot.
Exactly right. And you can tell too every once in a while because he'll be like, it's not like you're comparing them to the Mayans, and their whole thing. And you're like, what do you mean their whole thing? I don't know anything about that right there. Like you're over here saying it like it's like common knowledge, but he has that framework already established, so obvious, in his mind.
Context.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are things to think about. Whatever you're trying to do, you have to try and do it. Yeah. You can't, whether it's leadership, whether it's playing guitar or ukulele or jiu-jitsu, you can take away some knowledge from observing and from reading and from listening, but you got to go do it. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. And then he goes on to say, and this is actually how he closes this out. He goes on to say, every critic knows the principles of painting, but very few of them can paint. There's no substitute for facing each situation and dealing with it as it actually is, rather than as you would like to see it in terms of the principles of war. So important. It's so important to have the framework and then like erase it and look at the real problem, right? It's so important to have the framework. You know, this happens in fights. Somebody will have a game plan and something will happen that will disrupt the game plan, and they lose because they had their framework already in mind and they don't adapt. I remember Dean was in a fight and I was cornering him, and do you know Dean's half guard come up on a single, right? Yeah. And this was late in his career, and that was one of his moves. And he's like really hard to stop when he does that. But you can stop him, especially if you know what he's doing, especially if you anticipate it, especially if you sat down with your coaches and figured out a good way to stop it and then tested it a bunch. So Dean is in this fight, and he's in one of his most dominant positions, bottom half guard. Yeah. He's going to come up on a single. He's going to get about whatever. And the dude he's stopping it. I forget what he's doing. I'll go back and watch the videos. He's like doing something with his hip, or he's putting his hand on something. He was stopping him. And I was like, Dean, the guy has it. He has your half guard. What is it? Like pegged. He has it pegged. Yeah. I was telling him to go full guard, and he didn't win the fight, unfortunately. But the guy had pegged his half guard, and Dean, which was surprising. I think Dean had been so effective with this for so many years that when it got stopped, it was like he just couldn't. He didn't like making it. And look, it's a fight. He's getting punched in the head. There's a time limit. If he would have gone one more round, maybe you'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Right. But those are the things you got to watch out for. You got to watch out for preconceived notions of what you think things are going to be and how you think they're going to go down. Yeah. So really, this is why I've been talking so much lately about having an open mind, because my idea that my half guard is great and I can come up on the single with just about anybody, that's a preconceived notion. And it closes my mind to believe that. I have to open my mind. And once somebody stops it twice, the mind should be fully open. Like, okay, this guy he has me pegged. I'm going to adapt. I'm going to change. So having an open mind to see things, as the book says, deal with it as it actually is rather than as you would like it to be. That is a life mode of operating that will help you infinitely, as opposed to, I think things are a certain way, therefore in my mind they are that way. They're not. And then it says, finally, if there is a real principle of war, it is the principle of the objective. The objective means more than all the rest. And this is, again, I already talked about it, but this is like going through life without actually knowing what your objective is. Without actually knowing where you're going, you're not going to get there. So you have to, above all else, know what it is that you are trying to accomplish. And he closes out this speech with this line. He says, if there's anything I can leave you with, it is this: rules can aid the wise, but they are snares for the fool. Got to know when to break the rules. You got to know. This is something Dean says a lot. You got to know the rules. You got to know the rules, and you got to be competent and proficient with the rules, and then you can break them, and you got to know when to break them. So, lots of good stuff in here. These fundamental rules, sure, they're principles for war, but if you think about them and you put them front of mind, they can guide your journey. The rules can guide your journey, but don't let them snare you. Got to keep an open mind. You know, I've been saying open mind lately. You know what I used to say? And I used to say it a lot on this podcast: free your mind. Free your mind. Remember those days?
Yes,
I don't know why. I think because keeping free your mind, I don't think was translating to people the way I wanted it to. Open your mind people seem to understand what I mean more than when I say free your mind. Like free your mind, people think, oh, just be wild, basically. Yeah. Free your mind. I sound like a hippie, right? Yes,
a little bit, yeah.
Even open your mind sounds like a little hippie-ish.
No, more. I don't think so, but yeah, I can see that.
Okay, well, it's slightly hippie-ish. It's real. it's related. You know?
Cool. Open mind. Have an open mind.
You never met a hippie that was like, oh yeah, I'm a very closed-minded person.
Oh
right?
yeah, the idea is hippies embrace that idea for sure.
Okay, so it's a little hippie-ish. So free your mind is even more hippie-ish.
Yeah, free your mind is hippie-ish. Yes, yeah. That's a hippie flavor for sure.
Okay, so I like the way free your mind sounds better, and to me it means exactly, in my mind it means exactly what I think. But as I would tell that to people, I'd be like talking to someone that's in a leadership position. I'm like, dude, you got to free your mind. Yeah. And they kind of like, and I go, eventually I started saying, oh, you got to open your mind. And it seemed to translate and be more understandable to people. Yeah. To open your mind up, because they understand the opposite of open is closed. Yeah. The opposite of free is Trapped. So that doesn't quite convey what the idea is. Yeah. I don't want you to untrap your mind, because that means your mind is stuck. I want you to open your mind so you can see different possibilities. Yeah. So closed mind seems like closed off, kind of a thing. Free or an open means like you're open to new, more info. Now you're more capable, kind of a feel. But free and trapped or free your mind is like, hey, think about everything, like just for the sake of thinking, almost, kind of a thing. It's not about letting things into your mind. It's more about like letting things out, maybe. I don't know. Let your thoughts out, kind of a thing. So it's like opposite almost, in a way, the feel. So that's what it is. You've got to open your mind. You got to free your mind. Otherwise, you don't make adjustments and you don't make adaptations. Like this book, like you won't get there. And in fact, I will say this: you can't even get married to your objective. And I mentioned that, like, you have to have an open mind that your objective might change. Your objective in your business, in your team, in your family, your objective might change. It might go up, it might go down, it might go left, it might go right. Like there's businesses, people have a business, they're like, we want to be able to do this. And then all of a sudden they realize that's unrealistic, or that's going to take too long, or that's going to cost too much, and they adjust their objective. So you got to realize that your objective might change, but you've got to make sure that you understand that you are going somewhere. What is the objective? That if your objective moves, fine, move it, and then know what it is and move towards it. So that's what we got. These laws can certainly help you. These principles can certainly help you think through your issues, help you to see more, hopefully, and hopefully help you to win whatever war you might be fighting right now. And Echo, if we are going to war, we're going to need some fuel. It's true. What do you think? We're going to need some fuel. Now, you've been I noticed from I've heard stories, I've heard things that you're upping your hydrate situation. Word on the streets. And that's the word on the streets. So are you doing hydrate after every workout, during workouts? Nope, before actually. Before workouts. And sometimes after, but mostly before. So, okay, after jiu-jitsu, yes. But I've been out of jiu-jitsu for like 2 weeks almost already. Oh, you got because of my injury. You got the tendonitis or something? Yeah, on the inside of my elbow. Mm-hmm. It's kind of bad. It was kind of bad. It's getting better though. Nonetheless, that aside, hydrate. And I told you this, morning mix. Every morning, no compromise. Every single morning. Hydrate, obviously mixed in water with creatine. Mm-hmm. That's the morning mix. That's the morning one. Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter what flavor. The blue one, the green one, whatever. You like both those ones? I like them both equally, okay. Yes. So that's the morning mix. But if I'm doing the workout right when I get up, which is sometimes part of the gig, not always, but sometimes if I'm doing the workout, first thing in the morning, like you kind, I'll add the pre-workout in there. That's Are you going full scoop pre-workout? Not yet. Half scoop? Like half-ish, a little bit more than half, but yeah. Getting the pump. Heck yeah. Big time. All right, so you want to get this stuff, go to jockofuel.com, get yourself some hydrate, get yourself some greens. Mm-hmm. Greens do not have to taste like dirt. They can actually taste good. Yeah. We got energy drink that's actually good for you. Yeah. Which is totally unique. Yeah. There's no one else can be like, oh, our energy drink is literally good for you. Yeah.
Well, I think the whole idea of energy drink has always been, and I think we've all just kind of grown to accept it or just reject energy drinks altogether. But the thing that we've all kind of accepted is like, hey, this is just a short-term fix
It's
for
a
some
trade-off.
fatigue.
It's a sacrifice.
Yeah, and that's just part of the gig. That's what we're doing, and that's why people are like addicted to energy drinks. They're like, oh, I'm addicted. I know it's bad, whatever, because it's not a thing that's good for you. Everyone knows that, kind of thing, because all the poison, the preservatives, the freaking other chemicals in there.
Yeah.
But we don't have that problem.
We don't have that problem. No downside. No downside. So JockoFuel.com, get yourself some milk. Now, you are apparently convinced that banana ready-to-drink milk is the best one ever made.
It's currently in the front running of my favorite. Yes, the chocolate's good, but chocolate.
But no, what you said to me earlier today when you were literally drinking one, you said this is the best ready-to-drink protein of all time. Number one on your list.
Yes, and it happened to be a banana. Yes, but I feel
so it could be any of them.
Banana and chocolate. The vanilla, I don't go that hard with.
Dang,
only
that's
it's
weird
not part
to
of
me.
my delivery.
Yeah.
That's why.
Vanilla for me is melted ice cream.
Yeah,
which
and
everybody likes.
Yeah, but I would rather melted chocolate ice cream, to be honest with you.
And you're a little bit of a connoisseur of ready-to-drink protein.
Yeah, okay. So how the conversation went, if I remember correctly, I just mentioned it was basically me just expressing myself, expressing my feelings out loud, which sometimes I'm not very. I'm against that. From time to time it happens. Nonetheless, it did happen. This is what I said. This is what I expressed. I know about ready-to-drink protein. I'm no stranger. Since I've been lifting, since ready-to-drink protein has been a thing. Even available, even before it was a thing. Available, but I've been down with it. Like, because you just buy it. It's not like a soda or something. You buy the milkshake, protein, whatever. You trade off for some taste, whatever. So I know, I'm familiar. But it's like one of those things where it's like, I know it's not going to taste all that good, but hey, protein, right? All good. But this one, I don't really go to the store and just buy them all the time before this one. Every once in a while, I will, just if I need the macros.
Oh, so before it was like a substitute scenario or in extremus situation. We're going catabolic. We need some protein.
Macros. Yeah, exactly right.
But now you're proactively.
Yes, and the point of what I said was, even if I didn't know you at all, that's what I said. If I didn't know you at all, I would still buy this one all the time, just for the sake of like the whole everything that it offers.
You can get this stuff at JockoFuel.com, boy. You can get it at Wawa. By the way, the milk is going into Wawa. We've been fighting a war in Wawa. There's a lot of other companies, they don't want you to have that healthy option. But so we're at Wawa, Vitamin Shop. Vitamin Shop's got everything you need. GNC, military commissaries, AFES. I was just out at the Air Force Base the other day, checking it out. We got it. We're live.
Wait, so milk wasn't in Wawa?
Milk was not in Wawa.
Huh. Well, we don't have Wawa,
looks
so
like
this
it's going in now. Yep, going in now.
That's cool.
Hannaford, Dash Stores in Maryland, Wakefern, ShopRite, HEB down in Tejas. Tejas. What's up, Tejas? They're just getting after that HEB. You better give respect to HEB too in Texas. Like you will if you downplay or diss HEB in Texas. First of all, there's no reason to, but if you were just wild, you're gonna get punched up, fool.
So when you diss HEB, you diss yourself.
In Texas?
Yeah.
When you diss HEB in Texas, you're gonna probably get talked to, real sternly. Then Meyer up in the Midwest, Harris Teeter, Lifetime Fitness, Shields, and look, small gyms. People are getting it in there. We're getting all kinds of requests because people in the gym. If you own a gym, if you own a jiu-jitsu gym, if you own a CrossFit gym, you own a powerlifting gym, you own a fitness gym of any kind, you want to help your clients be better. So email jfsales@jockofuel.com. You can hook that up. Don't forget about Origin USA. We got American-made clothing, boots, jeans, T-shirts, the whole 9 yards. Jiu-jitsu gear, by the way, we talked about jiu-jitsu a lot today. Why? Because jiu-jitsu reflects life in many different ways. And if you can get good at jiu-jitsu, you will be better at life. We got workout gear there too as well, and hunt gear. And then, of course, we got JockoStore.com, which Echo made up the name, Mr. Original.
Yeah, well, not 100% original, but yes.
Very creative.
Store. Oh, yeah. Well, discipline equals freedom. As far as that goes, represent. Where do you get it? Jocko Store. Check. So it all kind of fits together.
Dude, I just checked the mail and somebody gave me a Discipline Equals Freedom deaf core freaking guitar pedal. Like, so when you play electric guitar, you can put effects on the guitar, and it's done through pedals. And there's a whole cult around different pedals.
Yeah.
Well, a guy just sent me a sick one that he handmade. I'll show it to you.
That's
it's
pretty dope.
Sick.
Yeah, huh? Yeah, that's crazy.
So when the album comes out, I'll probably use that pedal.
Hell yeah. Right on. Well, display. We don't have pedals, but we do have other things.
I kind of do.
Yeah,
I got
you
a pedal.
Not on the stores, what I'm saying.
Check.
But nonetheless, if maybe it could be a thing. I'm kind of eager to see what it looks like. Mm-hmm. But yes, as far as hats and hoodies, shirts, that's the big one. Shirts. We wear shirts pretty much every day. So let's say you are into T-shirts. We have a subscription Snare. You can get a new design every month called the Shirt Locker. That's on Jocko's store. So yeah, subscribe to that. Some soap on there. That's the thing I haven't really been talking about. So you got Warrior Kid soap, Jocko soap, Def, so discipline equals freedom soap. This is all natural stuff.
What about the killer soap?
Killer soap. That's the strong antibacterial one. I think it has the
It's got the charcoal in it, and I think it's got the tea tree.
Yes, I think they all have tea tree, or they all have tea tree oil.
The killer
in
soap
it.
is GTG.
Yeah, because it has the what do you call the scrubber stuff in it?
I don't know what that's
or
called.
something. It's like it has like an exfoliant like property.
I think that's the charcoal.
To it. Yeah. But that's a good one. Anyway, there's a lot of cool stuff on there. The new thing too, Chris.
Big on the skincare path over here.
Brad, don't act like you don't know. You know. But here's the thing. Christmas is coming out.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I added a Christmas inspired item: socks. Discipline equals freedom socks. Look,
bro, represent.
So here's the thing with socks. As a kid, nobody cares about socks. When you get socks for Christmas, you're like, oh, socks. It's like one of those joke things. Like, I got socks. That sucks, right?
Dude, I got a lot of socks for Christmas over the years.
As a grown adult, I'm kind of fired up to get socks, especially if they're cool ones. And these are cool ones. So yeah, and I'm not. You can buy them for someone else if you want, or you get your wife on the horn and be like, hey, they got some socks. Just saying, Christmas is coming up. Just saying. See what I'm saying? Also, there's gift cards on there too. If you can't decide, boom, get the gift card. You're good to go later.
Check
boom,
you out.
Jocko
on that
store.
one.
It's true, bro. I'm here to tell you.
I like it. Also, you probably need some steak. Look, you can have that RTD mulk.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's a good dessert. Yeah. What's the main course? Main course, ColoradoCraftBeef.com or PrimalBeef.com. Look, it's just next level. That's what we're doing. So check those out. You need some steak for your fridge, for your dinner. You want to do the Sean Glass methodology. I think he's doing the cast iron pan.
Yeah.
I think he said 2-2-2-2. Yeah. 2-2. No, 2-2-2-2. So 4 minutes per side.
Yeah.
My wife, habitual rule follower, by the way.
Yes.
She's not doing his protocol. She's doing 3-3-2-2.
No cover.
I'll have to confirm.
Yeah, so I recently, because you said the 2-2-2-2 for collective minutes on each side, but it was without the cover. I usually do the cover 2 and 2 done with the cover on it. Perfect sticks every single time. But I did your protocol because maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's another element. So I did that.
Open mind, I like it.
Yeah, same though. Same result. Just as good.
Didn't matter?
I could not taste the difference, and I do eat a lot of steaks for sure with the protocol.
All right, so there you go. PrimalBeef.com or ColoradoCraftBeef.com. Subscribe to the podcast. Don't forget about JockoUnderground.com. We're about to record one of those right now. Little alternative podcasts where we answer your questions. We give you some guidance on life that might not be a little adjacent. It's a little bit. It's more adjacent to this podcast, but it's also a platform that we control so that the tech overlords can't control us. We can do our own thing. If you want to support that, it's $8.18 a month. If you can't afford it, it's no big deal. Just email assistance@JockoUnderground.com. We want you there. YouTube. Subscribe to that. Psychological Warfare. Get some of that. Flipside Canvas. Dakota Meyer making cool stuff to hang on your wall. And then you got a bunch of books. I've written a bunch of books. Get the books. If you want a little bit of doctrine and guidance around these leadership principles, get those books. Also, if you got kids, get them the Warrior Kid books. Come on. Just get your kids and the neighbors' kids. You'll have better neighbors. Your kids, the neighbors will be better. They'll be better human beings. They'll be thankful. So there you go. Bunch of books. Echelon Front, we solve problems through leadership. We just got back from the muster. Sold out. Down in Dallas, Texas. Then we went to Battlefield up in Gettysburg. Just awesome events, learning leadership. Everything we do sells out. So if you want to come to one of these events, go to echelonfront.com for details. And we also have an entire leadership consultancy. We've got incredible instructors from a bunch of different backgrounds, and we teach these principles that can solve the problems inside your company or your business or your organization. So go to echelonfront.com if you need help in those categories. We also have an online training academy called Extreme Ownership Academy, extremeownership.com. Again, look, are you going to learn to play tennis by watching Masterclass from Venus Williams? You might not learn to play, but you can definitely pick up some hints that are going to improve your game. And that's a physical sport. So can you do that? Will you learn if you go check out my Masterclass? You're going to learn some stuff? Yes, you will. But you're going to need to go back to the gym. You go back to the gym, go to extremeownership.com, and you can really get granular on learning about leadership. And the leadership is going to apply not just if you're a business person, not just if you're a CEO, if you're a dad, if you're a mom, if you're a friend, if you're running a little league team. It's going to help you run everything in your life and make it better. So there you go, extremeownership.com. If you want to help service members, active and retired, you want to help their families, Gold Star families, check out Mark Lee's mom, Mama Lee. She's got a charity organization. If you want to donate or you want to get involved, go to americasmightywarriors.org. Don't forget about heroesandhorses.org. Micah Fink, currently out there in probably just a light dusting of snow in the Montana mountains. He's out there barefoot in a loincloth, and he's dragging a bear that he's going to eat for dinner, feed his family. Heroesandhorses.org. He takes veterans and first responders up into the wilderness so they can get lost and get found. And also Jimmy May's got an organization called beyondthebrotherhood.org, checked out as well. And if you want to connect with us, we're on the interwebs. We're Echo's at Echo Charles. I'm at Jocko Willink, and we're both anti-algorithm. Don't let that monster freaking grab you. That's what it's trying to do. Little brainwashing tool you got in your pocket to suck your brain away. Just be careful of it. Thanks to all service members who are in harm's way right now. The world is a volatile place. It's a hostile place. We know that our military members are out there on the front lines standing by. So thanks for what you do. Stay alert and stay alive. And also thanks to our police, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, dispatchers, correctional officers, border patrol, Secret Service, all first responders. I know there is a lot going on in the world right now. There is heightened risk. So the same goes to you all. Thanks for what you do. Stay alert and stay alive. And to everyone else out there, the principle that you could find on most of these lists, once again, was the objective. You have to know your objective. You have to know what it is. You have to know where you're going. Because if you don't know your aim, how are you going to get there? What are you going to do to get there? So know your objective. Write it down. Know your aim. Know your unified strategic goal of your organization, and know what you're trying to do as an objective for yourself. Keep it front of mind. Keep it front of mind. And then fight to get closer to it every day by going out there and getting after it. And until next time, this is Echo and Jocko.